Right, we're not.
Because we've got a lot to cover. We've got a lot to cover in pretty much less than an hour. You know, an early wildlife season combined with a statewide drought has our fire department ramping up for even bigger blazes. They say it's more likely to happen this year because of the potential of the drought and the destruction that has happened in the past. It's kind of a foresight of what might happen. California experienced 6 of the largest and most damaging fires in history in 2020, and that fire season alone, which we saw about 4 million acres burned statewide. And basically letting you know that in 2008, that record was held. It's now been broken. So with the continued dry conditions, the temperatures are already getting way above where they should be in the normal time of year. 2020 fire season, it looks like it might be catastrophic, if I can get that word out, and devastating all at the same time. Let's add to that our public safety power shutoffs, also known as our PSPSs, and the response to severe weather. And California has a recipe for disaster. And we all thought the pandemic was bad, didn't we? So let's go ahead and start by introducing my guest today and let them know a little bit let us know a little bit what's going on in our area as well. Our panelist today is a very vast panel that has a very, very hands-on experience with all of the above that I just mentioned. First, I'd like to introduce Chief Paige Meyer with San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District, Deputy Chief Frank Drayton, San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District, Ron Marley, who is Disaster Preparedness Coordinator for San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District, Cynthia Palmer. Cynthia is a meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service. We've got Mark Van Gorder, Senior Government Relations and Public Affairs for PG&E, Victor Baker from the Diablo Vision Senior Manager at PG&E, John Walsh is here also with us today, Public Safety Specialist for PG&E, and Roxanne Cruz, the Senior Local Customer Relations Manager at PG&E. Let's go ahead and start right off and jump right into fire if we can, pardon the pun. But I'd like to ask you, you know, one of the things that we've seen that's been going on a continuous basis is May 31st was the deadline for vegetation abatement. And we see those signs up every May, and I still see a few of them around town right now. How important is that? And what happens if a resident does not abate their areas? Chief?
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Mayor Morgan. It's always a pleasure to be here. With those signs, the hazard abatement we do is probably one of the top ways that we prevent devastation in our community. The reality of it is we are not unlike most places in California. We have a lot of wildfire areas. It's very important that we get that message out. We do that every year, and we inspect upwards of 16 to 17,000 properties a year to make sure that we're getting the work done and the citizens are getting the work done. And we also have a huge outreach. We talked about it in an earlier episode of Town Talks. We engage our citizens at a very high level. We have Ron Marley, who will go out and meet with HOAs, meet with individual citizens and give them advice. So it's one of the very first things that we do to try to prevent a bad wildfire season. And I would turn it over to Deputy Chief Frank Drayton to talk a little bit about that program, because what we have found is that you've already seen fire season start to inch into May. So even today, we're feeling like we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, so to speak, but we're confident now. We've gotten all of the hazard abatement inspections done. And you should know this, and as I turn it over to Chief Drayton, the beauty of our community is our citizens are always on point. They take care of their properties at a very high level. And we really appreciate that as a fire district. I think in my time here, and it's going on 9 years, we have had to find somebody one time. And by fine, that means we had to actually do the work. And they actually wanted us to do the work. So they said, please do it for us, handle it. It's a unique community. They should be very proud of themselves. Chief Drayton.
Thanks, Chief. I'll just add our weed abatement program, as the chief said, is pretty robust. We start April 1st, we send every parcel owner a letter advising of the hazard and their responsibility to maintain their parcels. And then we follow up again on May 1st, we send a postcard reminding them again. And then throughout those 2 months, we spend a lot of time with HOAs, property owners, educating them, working with dead tree issues. And we try to get them completely prepared for the June 1st date where we start going out and inspecting. I can tell you as of now, we've completed about 2,500 inspections, and we've had 6 not violation notices, but notices to remind people to abate, which that's not uncommon. They'll always have it done. But we're actively pursuing those parcels. We're out inspecting Monday through Friday, and we're also inspecting in the SRA area. We partner with CAL FIRE. We do the inspections a lot of times because they're not able to because they're understaffed. So we work very close with our ranger unit here, and we spend a lot of time on their inspections as well. Anything else to add, Chief?
Nope.
So, with that said, though, we're talking about residents and them taking care of their properties, but obviously there's a lot of foothills in our area. We've got that lovely steep tree studded type of hillsides and the expanse of golden fields that we all come to love. And with the drought right now, it seems that would be a great combination for a fire. I know that we have mentioned in the past the Butte fire and how that could be the similarities to Danville. What do we do as a community for something like that, the preparation for something like that to happen in our area? And can something like that happen in our area?
Well, I would start by saying absolutely, and I look at it more as the Oakland Hills is how I see a small Oakland Hills. If you look at the west side of Danville, Alamo, those are the areas that I know we as a department, command staff, firefighters, that's the area that keeps us up at night. Because you're right, it's beautiful. People want to live there, but we have a changing climate issue going on. We've got maintenance issues with utility companies. We've got all kinds of recipes for disaster. None more than the other, but a combination thereof. So we are very, very aware of it. We train at a very high level to be able to respond into those areas there, and especially in Danville. All the little nooks and crannies if you drive up the west side. It's not simple in that area, but we are prepared as well as we can, but we also have to be realistic. We have evacuation maps that you can find on our website, firedepartment.org. We have all kinds of resources for people to look at and prepare themselves in case something goes wrong, because at the end of the day, there's only 45 firefighters on duty within the San Ramon Valley. And that's not enough if the west side of Danville goes up. So it's going to be an evacuation issue. But we're doing a good job. I feel confident, but there's no way to be completely prepared if something happens. Chief Drayton, anything to add on that?
No, I think just that we're continuing with Ron's efforts to start exploring fuel mitigation programs and ways to open up those roads a little bit. So we're always trying to find opportunities to at least increase the safety of the public.
And I think one thing that I'm going to have Ron Marley speak of at some point. The other thing that we're trying to do a big push on is to combine our CERT team, which is our community emergency response teams, with a FireWise type mentality with a FireWise program. I think we all know that insurance companies are starting to drop people in California. We're getting complaints on a regular basis. That's not up to us. We're stuck with what we, as a fire district, we don't have any power over the insurance companies. But what we're finding is by being more active, creating the ability of communities to put these FireWise teams together in different areas, that these insurance companies are looking positively on those. if it's okay, like to have Ron speak to the FireWise community thought process, because it's a new thing for a lot of people in California, and it's not simple, but it's important to get the word out.
Absolutely. Ron, welcome.
Thank you. Having a little of audio and so if it's too poorly and let me know. But
Yeah, we've got you.
Yeah, we've got too much feedback, Ron. We need to get you better Wi-Fi.
Okay.
While we're waiting for Ron to answer that, get his Wi-Fi up going there, let me ask a couple questions that I'm kind of concerned about as well. You know, you talked about evacuation routes, and just recently there was a fire on Mount Diablo, Morgan Territory, no relation to me, by the way. It is also prone to fires and things like that, and we're surrounded by that. So the possibility of those fires finding their way into Danville is there, and I know that you immediately put fire and dispatch out there to put out vegetation fires very fast, and kudos to all of you for doing that, because the one that just happened in Mount Diablo was just as soon as it was seen, it was like it was out. But what's the possibility of something like that happening in the town of Danville, as well as evacuation routes? A lot of our roads are very rural type looking roads. We have, you know, the major freeway 680 going through, but how are everybody going to get out of Danville if we're having a fire like that?
Great question. I mean, we have those evacuation maps, we have safety zones. I think it's incumbent on our citizens to take a look at that information and see those routes. What we try to do is we put these evacuation maps together, and we work very well with CAL FIRE, because a lot of credit goes to them. They were the first ones to start this program, to actually look at this years ago. And we jumped on board, I think about 4 years ago. So it's important for our citizens to take a look, because it's very possible that you can have a fire that would shut down evacuation roads. And we want them to know kind of the main roads we're taking up to these fires, and what roads they should take as they leave. That being said, just leaving isn't always the right thing to do. So we have to make sure that they have the proper thought process as well. As I say, safety zones, we might want them to go to an area that's safer, so that an evacuation out like a citizen may think in their mind might be the best thing. But unless they take a look at those maps, and if they're in those zones, they need to make sure they put those maps on the refrigerator, make sure they look at them, make sure they know their options, because it's not just leaving. It might be staying in place at times, but they have to take a look and really do the research themselves. And I would say this, although Ron is hard to listen to right now, he usually is pretty good and can comment very well. The beauty of our district, and I'm very proud of this, is we will go meet with citizens. So if folks are listening right now and they reach out to us and they look at the evacuation map and they're confused, there's something that's not, resonating with them, we will go meet with them individually. I know the town of Danville does the same thing with your emergency preparedness coordinator or disaster coordinator. We have the same mentality. So education is the key here. It can happen. I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and how our citizens take care of themselves will be the difference literally between life and death.
Ron, are you on now? Are you able to, did you get better Wi-Fi here? Are we able to hear you?
I don't know. You tell me. I switched to a different Wi-Fi system.
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay. So the question was the FireWise program, which is it's celebrating its 20th year this year with the National Fire Protection Association. And to be blunt, in the beginning, it was just kind of a cool thing that property owners could do, get together and work on mitigation. And it didn't really have any long-term, it had long-term impact in the community, but it didn't have impact outside of the community. What we're now seeing is that there's a few insurance companies that are writing policies only if the community is a FireWise community. So all of a sudden this program has taken on a greater interest, I think. And as Chief said, with the frequency of, they're not complaints because we don't have any power over it, but we get calls quite frequently about insurance cancellations this may be one of the very few things that groups of property owners can tackle to maintain insurance in the future. We really don't know, but it looks like it might be headed that way.
Well, that's good news to know as well. You know, another thing that's really important, and I know that the council has gone through emergency preparedness training and certification, but that's another thing that the residents can do is to get involved in the CERT program. Can you give us a little update on what you're doing? I know the pandemic has kind of put a halt to a lot of it and made it more of a virtual. What is the fire do for that? And can you kind of let people know what they need to do to get involved with that program as well?
Absolutely. I'll let Frank oversees that CERT program, but I will say that the training that we have here and again, the community involvement, I hate to pander to the community, but it's just true. We have got people that have been so interested and so committed to safety, unlike any place I've seen. So we've been fortunate to train many people. And now what we're trying to do with our CERT program, and you're right, the pandemic did take a step back, but I know we did a virtual perspective of CERT training. But what we're trying to do is with this FireWise program is start to combine them together. So what you're going to see moving forward is not only CERT, but wildfire education, and then letting them know these are opportunities to make their community or their specific neighborhoods even safer. So Chief, I don't know if you want to talk to the specifics of how many folks have been trained or what's going on with the program.
I believe our program is probably one of the largest I've ever seen. We have over 1,200 members involved in CERT. We have 9 what we call area groups within our district, and we host at least 2 to 3 classes annually. And the good news is in the fall, we're going to be start back in classroom classes, and we'll have up to 25 folks per class. But even through the pandemic, we still continued efforts. We continued our group meetings. Everything was done obviously through virtual platform, but we kept as many folks involved and participating as we can through the pandemic. And as the chief said, our push now is to try to get those CERT groups to start considering and exploring the FireWise program as well. That's something they have to do. We can't drive that. We're not allowed to say you will become one. We have to let the public, the community do that. So a big push for this next year is to have the CERT groups at least educate the groups, educate the community, and try to get our first fire smart area in our district.
And you know, I mentioned also that it's at no cost. I mean, I think that is phenomenal that you can sign up for these classes and it is at no cost, because we look at it as if there's an emergency, let's not forget that we all know how to shake, rattle, and roll out here in California with our earthquakes.
Nice segue. That's good.
Oh, well, thank you. But you know, one of the things that that some of us have failed to believe anymore is that we do have earthquakes out here in California. And you know, the USGS has stated that within in the next probably 30 years, we're due to have a 6.7 or above. And just to put that in perspective, you know, the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989 was 6.9. So we have a lot of fault lines out here. We have a lot of opportunity to have a large earthquake in our area. And with CERT training, not only would they be able to help with fire or with, you know, medical or whatever it may be, but also earthquake and earthquake preparedness, because we seem to forget that one right now with all the fires going on. You know, one of the things you mentioned as well after escape routes was, how does the public know? I know I have a lot of apps on my phone. I have Nixle, I have Pulsepoint. Can you give me a quick briefing of what I should have on my phone? Because you're not going to walk around, I mean, you might with a megaphone saying, you know, evacuate now. How does that work in an emergency? How are we finding out, and how do we know when to leave?
Great question. And I think one of the things that we've been challenged with, I think everybody on this call could could understand, or on the Zoom could understand, is so many options, right? And one of the keys, I think, to any good alerting system is to make sure that you only alert on the big ticket items. Otherwise, people shut them off. I mean, that's just what we found, right? So Nixle has been really good. Nixle is what we utilize. I know we've looked at different options as we move forward. We never, as you know, Mayor Morgan, technology-wise, this district has always been on the cutting edge. But we're always looking at different options, but the key is to find that one. And for us, you have Nixle as our primary. I think that has been the one that has been the most effective in getting information out. And we always are challenged to not put things out. And I know, believe me, I want to know when a road shut down so I can, take a different avenue. But we don't want to just talk to people about every emergency that we have. So Nixle's a big one. The other thing that I think is important to note, and I'm kind of digressing, and you mentioned Pulsepoint. I think it's very important for people to know about Pulsepoint. Pulsepoint is an app that will give you, in our community, every call that we're going on. So when you have Pulsepoint, you'll be able to see what your fire district is doing in real time, which is phenomenal for those of us that really do want to know what's happening. And even for those, looky-loos that just, busybodies, because I know I have them in my family. They just want to know what the heck's going on so they could act like they knew something. But more important, and this is the key to Pulsepoint, it also is an app that will, if you know CPR, hands-only CPR, it will notify you when you get that app. It will notify you when there's what we call a CPR in progress or somebody down. You'll be noticed immediately if you're within 300 feet, which is important to the chain of survival. So Nixle for the fires, and I digress into Pulsepoint for helping your neighbor out and your community out, because you'll be able to respond and actually make a difference. Lives have been saved through that app, so it's a big deal as well. So keep that in mind.
So let's kind of go from there and talk about something else that's been happening besides earthquakes and fire, and that's power outages. We have had several of those. Lots of them have been planned, and a lot of angry people of having to have their power shut off. And I just kind of wanted to go back, since we've got PG&E here today, is to find out, why power outages, why these safety outages, as you're calling them. And people are wondering, aren't your grids up to par, or what's going on, and where are these grids located that can cause such a catastrophe in our area? Mark or John?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just say that with me, and you mentioned it earlier, is our public safety specialist, John Walsh. Maybe if John can talk for just a moment. I hadn't been prepared to bring up our grid. It's extensive, and I know we have limited time. But maybe John, you could talk for just a little bit about some of the things that we're doing. Mayor, as you know, I mentioned I have some slides that we can go look at, but I don't have one that shows the electric grid. So I'm going to see if I can pull something up really quick. John, if you're able to talk a little bit about what we're doing, I can try and zoom in on Danville and show people exactly how our electric grid runs.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, and the town of Danville. John Walsh, Public Safety Specialist. Real quick about my role. My role is primarily as an agency rep or liaison to public safety agencies, county OES, fire departments, police departments. I do have a fire background in a neighboring county, Alameda County, 35 years. I got involved with PG&E because it was a challenge. Things were going horrible for PG&E. I sat in the EOC for the first public safety power shutoffs, and it was a horrible rollout. People I could tell were trying hard, but they just weren't familiar with large scale event like that, where you have to do outreach with communities, and communities weren't used to this type of a power shutoff situation. So I was really nervous coming in because everyone was happy to see a firefighter. When I came to PG&E, our employees were being attacked, shot at, and beat up on incidents because the public was very angry. And PG&E has a sordid history, as we know, and we see in the media going back many years. And there's been lots of management change over the years, and still some of these problems persist. And then with the climate drying out and getting a little bit more extreme, there's more consequences to these issues. So the grid is not to a spec right now that the company feels is risk-free. So in certain communities where there's tier 2 and 3, and I can go into a little detail there, where we do have the type of fuels in the area. And in that area, we have a overhead wires that are such that tree strikes are coming down, can cause a fire. PG&E is electing and has approval to shut the power off as a last ditch effort. It basically just points to, you know, failure of that infrastructure to be resilient to those weather influences. And with the condition of the fuels, you know, we're in another drought cycle. Droughts are all the time. My whole career, we've been talking about drought, seems like every year, with very few exceptions. So this is normal to have this dry fuels and to have the dry brush and grass. This year is a little more extreme, but you know, we've had this issue for quite a while.
So you have up on the screen right now. Can you let me know what we're looking at here, Mark? You've got your screen up?
Yeah. Yep. I just thank you, Mayor, for sharing that. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe I'm still trying to figure out how to use Zoom correctly. I can't see what hopefully you're seeing on the main screen.
Your grid, I think it is, yeah.
I could talk to what you got going on there if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is basically a view of transmission assets going through this part of the Bay Area. So you see the different color lines, those are transmission lines, and they go into substations where those triangles are. Then they branch out into your smaller lines. And I don't know if those will show up in here if we drill in.
Let me remove the roads. If you can go ahead, I'll pull up the distribution level.
So with that right now, when you have those lines going through, it looks like a lot of it is going over the hillside in unincorporated Danville, although it's still, you know, Blackhawk area in general, it looks like to me. And that's, you know, it's a barren area, but still it's right near homes. Is that where you're shutting off electricity from, is when it's coming in through that area?
No, we're shutting off areas that are, you see that green network of lines, those are the green is undergrounded electrical. So fortunately, your community, San Ramon, Danville, has a lot of underground infrastructure. Where you see the small dam or squiggly lines that will show up, we'll see if we get that graphic going.
It's a lot of data, so it takes a bit to load, but these are your overhead lines.
So
those are the lines that we're concerned about.
Right.
And where those lines go into your tier 2 and tier 3 areas, which are your shaded light brown and your red, those are areas that we want to take out. We want to take out of power. If we do forecast winds in that area that are above 20 with humidity below 30 and the fuel moisture levels determined to be low enough that ignition becomes much more probable due to sparks or a wire coming down.
Now, we were told that notification would come because at first it was just all of a sudden you're in a meeting, you're sitting somewhere or whatever, and just it was like, you know, just surged, it was down. And then PG&E came out with the idea that they were going to let us know, give us fair warning, at least 48 hours or so. And, you know, that's been happening, but not been happening. How far in advance will we be getting notifications? And do you see the power shutoffs continuing for quite some time into the future?
Can you see this on the screen, Mayor, now that I've switched over
Yes.
to how will customers be notified?
Yes.
You know, John, maybe you could start off by talking a little bit about your role working with the Office of Emergency Services with the county. As Mayor, typically we're looking out with our meteorologist, and I know we have someone with the National Weather Service here, so that'll be interesting to hear from them as well, because that's a driving force, is the weather. You've already mentioned the fuels. So meteorology for PG&E is taking a look out days in advance. We have some links that I'll be posting here as we go forward in the call that I think will be helpful for the public if they would like to check daily or every other day. We'll be posting where we think we may have some high fire threat and maybe high wind events coming in, and we have people on what we call a watch and a warning and an alert. So we will do our best 48 hours ahead of time to be reaching out to customers, email, phone, text, whatever the customer notes is their preferred method of communication. Before that all happens, we are planning, communicating, and coordinating with local public safety officials, usually at least a day in advance of that all happening, so we're ready. And that's really John's role. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, John, the coordination?
Yeah, we start getting awareness of weather systems setting up about 10 days out. PG&E has a pretty robust internal meteorology department, and they do a lot of coordination and look at a lot of data from National Weather Service and from other sources and use a variety of models. As they start looking at them, the worst case models will start showing something, and then they look to have confidence in their projections based on more models coming into alignment. So we start looking at it 10 days out. At about 96 hours out from the event, we start to make some level of notification to the counties and to other agencies, PSAP centers, et cetera, that we got an event that may be coming. And we primarily focus at the OES level, at the big level, to give them awareness, because some OES centers will stand up for these events. And they're all in conjunction with usually red flag watches and red flag warnings issued by the National Weather Service. So the awareness is going out there for the community through the National Weather Service and media outlets. And then we're doing it a little bit earlier than that, letting counties know, hey, we see some stuff. We're going to be operating our EOCs. PG&E has an EOC that they'll set up for these events, because these events are very difficult to pull off. It's an all hands on deck type thing. Something I never understood when I was in the fire department. I thought, hey, you just turn a switch, but it's extremely complex and a lot of coordination with the grid, with federal partners, state partners, and being able to do this and not impact electricity for the greater Western United States. So we get the word out, and then from that point on, we have a cadence internally of meetings going over the weather and which areas we think are going to have the shutoffs due to the wind. And once that becomes more clear, we get into, and we feel real confident that it's going to have to happen, that's when customer notifications start to happen. But generally 2 days before customers are notified, public safety is notified through the OES model. And a lot of us will just make phone calls and text messages to fire chiefs also to give them some heads up that it's coming. Fortunately,
John,
this doesn't have
John,
a lot.
you mentioned, can I ask you a question real quick? You mentioned about getting the word out. And you mentioned that the PG&E customers can choose their way that they want to receive the notification. You have to go on your site, though, to sign up for those notifications. Is that correct? Or is that an automatic thing that you do to give notification to your customers?
I'll let Mark talk to that. He's better with customers than I am.
Sure. What I'll say, Mayor, is that we have been encouraging people for the last 3 years to go online on their account or call our 800 number and update their information so that we have their preferred cell phone email, and they can sign up for multiple means of communication. They could add 3 phone numbers if they want to. I'll post some more links, but as an example, it's up to the customer to update their information. I was shocked when I went to update mine and saw that I had an email address that was 10 years old, and I thought, wow, because, and honestly, right, who goes online to PG&E to update their information? You get your bill, you pay your bill, you're not happy about your bill, and you get your electricity. So we really are getting the message out to folks. I will post some links here that will help people get information. I want to talk briefly about some of our more vulnerable customers who typically may have some medical needs or something. We try very hard to reach out to what we call our medical baseline customers. That is a discount program. It's only a discount program, but people can enroll in it and they get reduced rates for electricity for medical equipment that they need. But it does give us an opportunity to reach out to those individuals. And again, text, phone, email, and in some cases where we do not get a response from those people, we will go knock and leave door hangers on the door if people don't answer, if we see that there's going to be a public safety power shutoff. So those are just some of the ways. I will post links. One new thing that we have, anyone can sign up to get notifications about a specific address. Maybe you have a mother or a father or someone that you're concerned about, and you would like to know whether or not the power is going to be out at their home. You can sign up and find out about that address specific. And again, I'll be posting as we go along further. If I could briefly just speak to the power outages. So John was mentioning the transmission line. Really quick, can you see the map here again?
Yes.
So here's the main transmission line. Think of that as a main interstate highway, large power line. But then that breaks off into really what parallels with the city roads and the city neighborhoods into these smaller branches. And as we mentioned, these branches carry electricity up into the high fire threat areas. And so our objective is to begin installing what we call sectionalizers. And I hope you can see this slide here. I won't go into it in depth. A lot of this information can take some time to cover, but I just want to point out, if you'll see these sectionalizers here that were installed in 2019, 2020, we have some that were installed in 2021, and there are more coming. The objective, if you see these little diamonds, and I don't have the ability to really zoom in and tell you the streets that they're installed on. But my point is, if you look at this west side of Danville and over here onto the east side area, the goal is to stop power from flowing up into these high fire threat areas, but maintain the power in these other areas in what we call non-tier or non-high fire threat areas. So I just wanted to mention that is one of our objectives, is to install these sectionalizers before the power runs up into the hills where it could be windy, where we have tree branches or trees or other things that can fall into the system. And I'll stop there because I know we're tight on time.
Well, what I wanted to do though is, because all of this, and if you want to stop sharing the screen, I wanted to go back to, because all of this seems to come back to one element, and that's Cynthia. Cynthia, you hold the key, it sounds like, to a lot of these incidences and a lot of reasons why power goes off, as well as a lot of reasons why we have a drought season and we have fires and all that other stuff going on. So welcome, Cynthia. And I wanted to take a moment to ask you, how do you work with PG&E, and do you see this drought continuing? Because it seems like 4 years ago we were flooding. I remember going in my backyard and watching the creek rise and thinking that pretty soon I'm going to have an entire backyard as a pool. And now I'm looking out there and everything is brown. So kind of give us a heads up on what's going on right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Mary, for having me today. Being a native Californian, as you are, you probably are well aware of that California is a state of extremes. We are either flooding or we are in drought. And so 2 years ago, we were coming off of very wet years. Last year was extremely dry. even worse this year. And so if you look for the entire state of California, it is at least in moderate, if not exceptional drought. And Contra Costa County is one of those counties that is in exceptional drought. So for the foreseeable, we're heading into our dry season. Therefore, the drought will likely continue. One of the sad stats that I was looking at earlier today is our snowpack considerably decreased starting April 1st. So even what snow was there this winter has rapidly melted and gone into the system. So yes, we do expect drought to continue. We are concerned about that for the summer. It looks like we will have a summer that has a better chance of being above normal temperature. So expect it to be hot and dry. All those are things that we take into consideration, and we do work closely with our fire agencies. PG&E is on those calls, but we aren't really part of their decision tree. We coordinate with the fire agencies. We're looking at the weather forecast and determining whether or not there is the potential for, I'll say, extreme fire behavior to occur should a fire start.
So you said you don't work with them, but you're on calls with them. So when you see something like this happen, are you the one that's notifying them this is what we see coming, or are they calling you to find out? How does that partnership work?
So we are on calls with the state and federal agencies concerning fire. PG&E has been invited to those calls, so they sit on those calls as well. So they are hearing the briefing that we're giving the fire agencies and the state.
I mean, we had our first red flag warning, I thought was really early over the Mother's Day weekend. To me, that seems early. Is that early, or is that just the norm?
It is early. We can get them this early, but we are running anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks ahead right now. So our fire chiefs probably can speak better to it than I can, but we've been looking at the fuel moistures and coordinating with the fire agencies because we are so far behind in precip this year. The fuels have dried out quicker. And so we are running about, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time. So we are starting to see fire conditions potentially be there should a fire start.
So not being a meteorologist like yourself, I'm assuming that modern technology is now taken a place. It's no longer you stick your finger up in the air and go, okay, it's windy today. So tell us, do you have cameras around Danville, or what do you have, or how are you monitoring our area in particular? Since we seem to be kind of like that hub of surrounded by hills and all that, and the weather definitely affects us.
So there is a whole network of observations. Some of it is weather service. Some of it is the fire agencies, some of it is PG&E, as they've installed a massive observational network. So we have a huge network of observations where we are getting real-time wind, temperature, and humidity data across the area. We are using our models to look out and look at potentially what the conditions are coming. So we have a pretty good idea. We do have long range models that look out 8 to 14 days. They're more outlooks. Our confidence starts to build once it comes into the 7-day forecast, but especially as you start, as a system starts to move towards the short term, so 1 to 3 days, we're fine tuning our forecast and really getting the word out there that, it's going to be dry, it's going to be windy, that kind of thing.
So you're not actually predicting the shutoffs. You're just trying to predict the weather, which is an interesting thing in itself, right? Because everybody's trying to, you kind of guide people on if they're going to have a picnic or not, right? So that kind of, put it in perspective, I guess. But the interesting thing is weather in our area has been so extreme, and it's got to be difficult. So if I want to get up-to-date information, I know that I pick up my phone and I look at the weather app and I see what it is. How do I get information directly from the National Weather services and all that? Is there a way to get information directly from you?
So there is. You can always go to our website, which is weather.gov/ slash San Francisco, because we forecast for an area all the way from Sonoma County in the north down to Monterey County in the south. But I encourage you to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're NWS Bay Area, Facebook NWS Bay Area. But when we are seeing these events coming in the future, we start emailing and messaging to our emergency managers, to the fire agencies. We start letting the public know, so we're hitting our social media to get the word out. There is also something you can sign up for called a wireless emergency alert. So you can sign up to get essentially a text message. Should a watch or warning be issued for your area, you can specify it to your zip code. So I encourage everyone, to become weather aware. We do have a huge push for a weather ready nation. So whether it's fire, whether it's wind or floods, that people are prepared and know what preparedness actions they need to take.
Absolutely, Cynthia. Absolutely. Well said. I wanted to go ahead and give a chance, since we are looking at time-wise, we could go on with this topic forever. But I know that there are a lot of people that are in the chat room that have questions. So I wanted to take a moment to ask Nicola if we have any questions for our panelists today. Nicola.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So we don't have any questions as such, but Kim Holmes has added a comment about insurance. And she says, after the Paradise fires, the insurance companies changed policies on homes throughout the county's hills. Enormous increases in premiums and requirement of payments in advance for an entire year. Of course, most folks in Oroville and Berry Creek couldn't afford it up front and were dropped from their insurance companies. So when the Butte fires ravaged those hills, many lost homes and were not covered, which has increased homelessness and displacement in the surrounding counties.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate, and kudos out to Kim, who has been a very big advocate of making sure that she has driven supplies up from Danville, collected them and driven them up to fire victims, and for the animals as well as people, and she's done a great job with doing that. So thank you, Kim, for doing that. I wanted to kind of change the kind of topic a little bit and go off to one thing. And I think this is something that I could ask either, the deputy or the chief on this one, or maybe even Ron knows. So, I watch a lot of those mystery shows, and there's, I shouldn't admit it, but those murder mystery shows, right? And, a lot of times the person's there and they're hiding under the bed and they dial 911, right? And then the person comes on the line and says, who's in your house and what's going on. And the reason I'm saying this is because the operator always says, stay on the line with me, don't get off the line. Here's the perpetrator, walks in the room, he hears the person talking to him, and then they rip him out from underneath the bed, and the rest is history, right? I understand you can text 911. Now, that was something that, not that I, plan on having a perpetrator come in my home, but it is interesting to know that that is available. Now, how does that work? I didn't even know there was such a thing. How does texting 911 work?
Just like you said, you can actually text 911 and it will come right. Well, for the town of Danville, it will go to the sheriff's office, and then from there they can forward that off to our dispatch center if it's fire, or they continue to hold the call if it's police. But it is a great addition to our dispatch center, and I think it's very valuable. But I'll tell you, like I tell my kids, I prefer to dial 911 and text.
Well, and
but in this a little bit better.
I'm talking about, it sounds to me like texting might be better because they can't hear anything.
No. Yeah, you're right. But it's a great tool, and really for us, it also where we see a lot of value in it is, and we've had some tragedy we've got beautiful hiking trails, right? Everybody knows the San Ramon Valley, specifically within the town of Danville, some of the best hiking in California, really, if you really go out there and take a look. But the ability for somebody to text 911, even to get something started, is important, because we can start pinpointing from a GIS perspective where that person is. and getting them help. So that's the other real advantage from what we see it as far as that application.
Technology has come so far.
Yeah.
You know, another thing that I was curious about, and this was something we had talked about earlier about the Butte fires, and Kim had mentioned about the other fires that came up. You know, you send other engines, you send, you know, help to these areas. What happens now if we need it and they're up there? How do you handle that dispatch dilemma?
Yeah, yes. Well, when it comes to the 9 Bay Area counties, we kind of all have an agreement. If there's an issue happening and there's a request for a strike team, which is 5 units, engines, type 3s, type 5s, whatever you have, we go immediately, and then we call backfill. So we'll call overtime. We'll put out a page and get folks coming back to the district to cover appropriately. When we do strike teams out of county to out of the 9 Bay Area counties, we're a little bit more deliberate with that, because we want to make sure that we have backfill and we have the capability to fill those. I'm sure as everybody knows, and I look at the firefighters on this call, there is a shortage of firefighter paramedics, and it's getting harder and harder to hire. So in the past, filling overtime was pretty easy, and sending out strike teams was great, because you know, you leave for a week and you have you get paid for it, and you get paid backfill, and everybody likes a little bit of overtime. We're seeing with this new generation, that's not necessarily always the case. So we are very, very deliberate in how we backfill and make sure that we have the ability to continue to protect our community first. That's our priority. But when we can help, we will help. And you should also know this, and I think it's important, especially with the public safety power shutdowns, the red flag warning days. Since my arrival and previous, we've always been very aggressive in how we staff. So when it comes to a red flag day, we upstaff an engine, we upstaff a battalion chief position. So we make sure that we actually have more resources than normal. So it allows us a lot more flexibility in those times when there's the possibility of a fire. And now with the public safety power shutdowns, and I'm hoping that PG&E is getting, you know, as we can see, kind of getting a little bit more control of the grid, so they don't shut down ridiculous places where, you know, why is my, you know, I live in a concrete block. Why am I shut down? Because, you know, the grid is, you know, from a safety perspective, they had no choice. But from our perspective, we understood the medical conditions, and PG&E's been good in trying to identify nursing homes, care homes, people that have medical issues. But at the time, we've had to also upstaff for PSPS's an extra ambulance, because our concern is we're going to be going to more medical calls because they don't have the proper electricity, you know, and or it's a hot day and now all of a sudden we get a lot of dehydration calls. So we've been very aggressive on all those fronts. I just wanted to make that clear. I think it's important for the public to know. Great question, and we're proactive. We don't wait, and we're not reactive.
You know, and you brought up an interesting point, because I know that, you know, our water services is supplied through a pump system that is electrical, that pumps up and pumps down the hill. So in case of a fire, it seems as though you guys would have to be working hand in hand, because, you know, you get a fire, you turn off electricity, and now all of a sudden you don't have water to put the fire out. So I know we've talked to East Bay Med about getting generators up in those areas, and that's been something that's been in the works. But it is a trickle effect. It is something that if the power goes out and then you have a fire and then you don't have water, that's a recipe for disaster as well. When do you, as PG&E, when do you see these power outages? And I know I'd asked it earlier, but I don't think we got the answer. When do you see this ending? I mean, is there an end in sight?
Well, John, I'll take a first shot at it, and then you can correct me. I think there's a few things. I believe there is an end in sight. There's a lot of work to do. I don't need to repeat too much of what Cynthia spoke to. The wind events, to me as a layperson, seem to have been stronger or more frequent than I recall. The fuel moisture, I was talking with the police, the fire chief in Calistoga, where we have a number of these events. They're saying that the fuel moisture there is tracking right now with what they would normally see in September. So we have some changing conditions. Our service territory, just a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, was 15% of our service territory would have been in that high fire threat area because of the vegetation and the threat to the lines. Today it's 50%. So 10 to 12 years, we go 15% to 50%. So the point there only is that there is a lot of work to do. Our folks are trying to prioritize those exceedingly high fire threat areas to reduce the potentials for ignition. We're installing those sectionalizers that I showed briefly. We're continuing to harden the system, which means that sometimes we'll take out wood poles and either put in possibly steel, metal poles, have what we call tree wire, so it's insulated tree wire. There's just a lot of work, and Chief Meyer, thank you for acknowledging the crews that are out performing that work. Mayor, to your point, do I see an end in sight? Yes. I just don't see it soon. There are years ahead of work to keep performing. That said, we're making a lot of progress, I think, to try and keep the power on in these non-fire threat areas. And our hope is that this year will be less and the following year will be less than that. But John, what correct me? What do you have to add to that?
Well, I think you're going to be here for a long, long time. I just think the risk is too high with the climate and the winds. Even in non-drought.
But let me ask you this. We've had wind. We've had drought. It's California, as Cynthia mentioned. We're known for that. So, I guess that's kind of the question that I would ask is that end in sight type thing. Obviously, this was, pardon the pun, sparked by something. So, how do we fix it? And I know that's a $1,000 million question that's probably gonna take you an hour to answer, but in a brief, how does
I'll answer it. Would you like me to answer it?
Sure. Go ahead.
I can take it.
No, I wanted to say something because these guys, the one thing I'll say, and Mark is right, and John is right. A lot of respect for John. He has a fire background. Their public safety specialists do great work, and they're liaisons, and they're very communicative. And we've had a great relationship with Les Putnam, who didn't want to be here because he knew I was here. So he sent John. I'm sorry, John, for you. But I would tell you this. This is the $1 million question. It's actually the $25, $30 million question. And our only frustration in the fire service and PG&E, because they have done a good job. I have to give credit where credit's due. And I had mentioned this before. There are lines folks out there risking their lives. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. It's a dangerous job. If you watch them on helicopters and you watch them doing the hot work that they do, very dangerous work. And I have all the respect in the world for those folks. I think the challenge that PG&E has, and we've challenged them to this, is to get out of certain businesses. They need to stick to the maintenance business. They need to stick to getting these poles changed out and have more crews on the line dealing with utility issues and less crews out there with fire pumps on the back of them driving around town. That's our contention, because we really do believe that they have the money and the will. And right now, I think they're moving in a direction to take care of the maintenance. So that's my challenge to, and I know that John and Mark are not in the management position to make those decisions, but we love them. We love their work on the ground. We just want them to focus on that. Let us be the firefighters. And I think John would agree. He didn't want anybody else coming in his battalion and starting to pretend that they're firefighters, right, John? I mean, we're being honest with each other. So, yeah. But I have confidence that they'll get ahead of it if they focus on what they need to focus on.
Chief,
go ahead,
Mayor,
John.
I'd like to respond to that. And thank you, Chief. In much respect, I remember when you came on from Vallejo, and you're a guy that was in the trenches, not your typical fire chief. You got the passion, drink the Kool-Aid, the whole thing. So remind me a lot of Chief Contreras in Hayward.
Okay, that's a backhanded compliment for everybody here. I hear you.
No, but he's a great guy. Great guy also. So understand the mission creep perspective with the SIPD program. And when the capstone first came in, I was all up in arms. I was at some of the Cal Chief meetings where it really became contentious. And I understand now better why they have that program. And it may not fit in all communities as well as it does in other communities where there's not a lot of support. And, you know, primarily what those crews do is a lot of support for the line crews. They can't do certain work unless that crew's out there. So, so something like that needs more discussion and maybe boundaries and understanding. And I know you, your organization and PG&E have come to some crossroads, and it's being litigated. That's above Mark and I's pay grade. Those are corporate decisions based on governance and CPUC perspectives, and that will all get sorted out. And we worked with Chief Winokur. He's done something similar, and so we understand that. And I think what's going on there is going to be replicated throughout the state. So I think a big component of that is communication and you knowing what's happening and being aware. And when I was in fire suppression, we had other agencies bring in fire resources when they did pipeline or dam work or stuff. Sometimes it was for confined space rescue capability or for hot work. They wanted some fire suppression. And it was always kind of a weird thing to have crews that aren't in your organization fighting fire alongside you or being there. No one wants surprises. So, you know, we're always going to work on making that better. And what the company does with the legal team, it's out of our hand, but we just want to maintain a good relationship so that when the incidents do happen, I can support your crews, make it safer, shutting power off ahead of the firefighters. If we see infrastructure is going to get slammed by fire, we'd like to get out there and put retardant on all of our poles ahead of the fire to save poles from coming down across the street and impacting egress and access into areas. So there's a lot more that I think binds us than separates us, but that's a new program. It's a little bit of mission creep. I felt that as a fire chief also, and being a labor guy. So fully understand and appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, and Mayor Morgan, I think he all good points, John. I couldn't agree with you more. The only difference is when confined space happens, they're required to notice us, and that's all we're asking.
Yep.
We just want to know when you're coming into our neighborhoods, and we don't want to get sued for asking that question because it's in your own wildfire plan that you would let us know. And so we put an ordinance together based on your plan, and we got sued for it, and that's unfortunate. So I think it's beside the point, but I think that the public needs to know that we're reasonable. And we will always stay reasonable, but we also, I get paid a lot, probably too much money and to do this job and make sure this community is safe. And so I'm going to always forget the labor part, forget all those. I will bloody my knuckles up to make sure I know when PG&E is doing hot work and bringing in fire engines into my neighborhood. I'm going to demand to know, because I'll ask everybody on this call in the community that's listening, what would they expect from their fire chief? They'd expect their fire chief to say, okay, another fire department's coming in because it's so dangerous that they need another fire department in here, and the fire chief doesn't care. I have to care. It's my job. So I hope you understand.
Yeah. And this
Absolutely.
And the thing is with all of this is we're all in a partnership together. We all have to work together somehow or another. And looking at all of the panelists today, it's a great show of how we all have to work together to make sure that we protect the public and our residents, constituents, and everybody. There's so much information and so much to know. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. It's such valuable information. I also, encourage anybody that wants to get contact information and or the links to some of the websites that we talked about today to visit our website, and we'll be happy to list those on the website as well. We also would like to throw a shout out to our police chief, who does a 10/8 show every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. and discusses different areas of safety in our community as well. I'd also like to remind everybody to mark your calendars for July 2nd, which is our next Town Talks. Stay tuned for the topic on that, as well as if you have any questions for me or staff, feel free to email me or give me a phone call. All that information is on our website as well at danville.ca.gov. And before I leave here today, I wanted to do a special shout out to my son who's graduating today from San Ramon Valley High School, hence the yellow that I have on today. And we will be heading down there right now. And I wanted
future firefighter, I heard.
That's absolutely loves the fire and had an opportunity to work with the fire department on a controlled burn. So it was a really exciting time for him as well. And I'd like to also congratulate everybody from preschool all the way up to college graduates. The future is yours. Go out and enjoy it. Grasp the world by the horns. Until next time, everybody, stay positive, test negative, and keep in touch. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.